Good morning, America. How are ya? Monday Morning Radio. Hi, I'm Denny Jelsma, and I'm at the world-famous Jacksonville Terminal Railroad Museum. Today is Monday, and you know what we do on Monday? It's show and tell, and it starts right now. The show and tell this morning is one more exciting thing that we're going to talk about, trains. But before I get that, I really want to talk about the luxury of travel years ago. You know, as a boy growing up in the cornfields of Iowa, we had corn all around us, so we had to go somewhere to see something. And I remember distinctly that every summer, my parents would dress me and my sister in our Sunday best, and we would go on a vacation somewhere, and we would go to Minnesota, Canada, the Black Hills, Colorado, Chicago, Kansas City, New York, and it was always a big deal. And people, when they went on vacations, they would dress up, and it was just an exciting type of thing to go on your summer vacation. And naturally, when you went back to school, you had the show and tell, and I love that part, talking about all the different places that I went. But the travel has changed so much. When I grew up and got a job, I had a job that I traveled all over the United States, Canada, Mexico, South America, and all overseas in Europe. And the travel back then in the 60s and the 70s on an airplane was very luxurious, and they appreciated you, and they had even first class. And as I grew in the ranks, I got to fly first class most of the time, and boy, they just treated you just like royalty. I remember they'd take my suit coat and hang it up, and they would offer me a drink when I first got onto the airplane. And the other day I took a flight and I had to go through security. It was like being frisked when I would go into Moscow and the other communist countries, and I had 21 inches of seat to sit, and then they basically told you that if you didn't use the right pronouns, they'd throw you off the airplane. They didn't care if you was there or not. All that has changed the luxurious of travel. The airlines copied the railroads for all of their luxurious travel. And when you boarded on a train years ago, it was a very big deal. And the railroads offered different types of service. The train that we want to talk about today is a very luxurious service, and it is one of the famed trains of song. We have the Wabash that was immortalized in song. We had the Chattanooga Choo Choo, and then we had Johnny Cash's Orange Blossom Special. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is the Orange Blossom Special. And it was very much of a winter train, and it was a luxurious train. It started from New York to Miami on the Seaboard Airline, and it was all heavyweight train, and it was all Pullman. And actually, this train that we're going to show you today is the 1949 version, and the Orange Blossom Special kind of evolved down through the years. It started out as a luxurious train, but then they offered different sections. They ran steam all the way up into 1939, and they had the West Coast section and they had the East Coast section. The West Coast section would stop at Jacksonville. The East Coast section would actually bypass Jacksonville, and it would go through Baldwin, Florida, and it actually make a station stop in Savannah, but on the main line it didn't back into the station then. And they had different sections, and so the West Coast section even had a few coaches that would go to the West Coast. The East Coast was really, they kept that train really pure, and they dieselized it in 1938 with E4s. And the Seaboard Airline was the only railroad that had the E4s, and they were, boys, sparkling, powerful engines. And they started it out in the 1939 season, and it ran all the way up to the war. During the war, the government made them stop that train, and after the war, the Seaboard decided that they were going to just keep it all Pullman, and with Pullman as their premier luxury train. And so when every railroad had their top train, and like the New York Central's was the 20th Century, Pennsylvania was the Broadway Limited. And so the Seaboard's premier train was the Orange Blossom Special. And so the train even had, as you can see on here, it says Orange Blossom, had a nice drum head, green drum head, and the cars would say Orange Blossom. Now our sample that we have here, not every car has the Orange Blossom sign on it. But in the 1952, 53 season, they painted them a reddish gray, and they even tried a modernized, lightweight 10-6 sleeping car, but the public didn't like it. It rode rougher than the heavyweight Pullmans, and so Seaboard made a decision not to run that. And so basically, when you think of the Orange Blossom Special, it was a heavyweight train. But the service that they gave on that train, I like it because it reminds me of the luxurious travel that I did when I was flying, and I spent 30 some years on an airplane every day of my life, over 3 million miles in the air, flying really classy airlines. And the Orange Blossom was that type of train. When you got on, they had a particular envelope that they would give you that said the Orange Blossom Special, and that's where your ticket went. And it was just a beautiful train. You had large bedroom compartments, and the service was second to none. And everybody in New York that wanted to come to Miami or into Florida, they, luxurious wise, they rode the Orange Blossom Special. And so this is the train. The food on the train was absolutely superior. And when you set standards, you set the standards for the Orange Blossom right along with the Broadway and the 20th Century Limited. Some of these Pullman cars, because they were in Pullman's pool, would go onto the 20th Century and some of the other luxurious trains in the north during the summer, where this was a winter train. And it ran every day during the winter season. And finally, in 53, 54, the Seaboard decided they were not going to spend the money to modernize it, and they just discontinued it, which was in a way kind of sad. But what I like about this train is I like to come here to the world famous Jacksonville Terminal Railroad, and I could just go back in time, relive the beauty of travel that I used to experience as a child and as a young man traveling the world, and just see and experience once again in my mind the luxury of travel. And that was the Seaboard Airlines Orange Blossom Special. And that's the way it was. Show and tell at the world famous Jacksonville Terminal Railroad in beautiful Jacksonville, Florida.